We should have gone to the government and tell them that why are there no courses in universities that teach podcasting?
Welcome to Needlessly Complicated, your safe space for hopefully almost rational outlook on life. Welcome to the show, Yasha. What a wonderful evening to record this episode.
Hi, good evening, Felix. Glad to be here.
So this week we've got some stuff happening in the news. Trump obviously got kind of confirmed as the nominee for the Republican Party, and we saw some more outlash against right-wing conservative politics. And then we have crazy stuff happening in Cologne with possibly new laws concerning rape, and also in Bangladesh people are still getting hacked to death.
Yeah, and we will also touch on our main discussion for today, which is our security and social welfare infantilizing our societies.
So a quick bit of follow-up. As you probably noticed from the intro, we changed up the show a bit. From now on, we'll also include a short news section about stuff that's been happening in the past few weeks, and that's been interesting or relevant to the main topic, to make it more exciting. And let us know what you think about that in Reddit or on Twitter. So Yasha, this week in the news, the big thing.
Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican presidential nominee following a decisive victory in the Indiana primary, and the decision by Ted Cruz to drop out of the race.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I think we have seen this coming a long time ago, actually. People have been underestimating Trump for a while, and every time he has won. So, actually, I'm not surprised and a little bit glad, because I am not a fan of Trump, to be honest, but seeing the other potential possibilities that have been until recently, I think he is the lesser of all evils.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. Well, I wouldn't vote for him necessarily if there were better choices, but then you got Hillary on the other side, presumably, and that's not a good choice at all. But what I like about him, that he is challenging the political climate in the US. He is also very anti-establishment, and people try to paint him as this new Hitler that will do all this bad stuff, but really his points are controversial, a lot of them. However, first of all, he will not be able to really get as aggressive as people make him out to be, because he would just simply not have the power to do that as the president in America. And then also, it's a lot of publicity, and he won't actually track down every Mexican that's in America and every Muslim and throw them out, but he is certainly catering to the more concerned public, and that's fine, I think. And he's not merely as aggressive as people make him sound to be.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, what we have seen, the attacks on him is, of course, the political correctness gone wild. But as you said, he won't probably do much.
So on that note, though, the political correctness gone wild, we've seen some leftists attacking Trump rallies, and then in Germany now, there's been happening other stuff.
A meeting of Germany's right-wing anti-immigrant party Alternative für Deutschland (AfD) has been marred by clashes outside the venue in Stuttgart.
So the Alternative for Germany, I told you about them a bit, but it's essentially a new party that's sprang up in Germany, and they are pretty right-wing conservative, a bit populistic, and people make them or paint them in kind of the Nazi corner. But they had their big meeting of the party where people discussed the party's direction, and actually they got similar revolts in front of their event as Trump has seen.
Right, and I mean the backlash against them is just amazing. I mean, we haven't seen such extreme political discourses in a while. About 400 people got arrested, and about even over 1,000 police officers were needed. So, I mean, this is a bit crazy.
And let's be clear here, they weren't protesting in a neutral, peaceful way. They set car tires on fire and threw fireworks at the police. So these are leftist extremists, and we've been seeing that springing up all over the place. And I'm not sure, but does this mean the left is failing and now they are trying to force their politics onto other people?
Well, I think that's actually not about failing, and that's why the effect is. It's the whole ideology has been this way for years now. It's their direction. That's how they operate.
Well, in a way, they are radicalized now, and they have to understand that force is getting them nowhere. It only paints them in a corner. So, further in Germany, we saw some stuff that's actually sprung out of the whole Cologne migrant rape scandal that's happened on New Year's Eve.
The German parliament is debating draft laws to give women more protection in sexual violence cases. Justice Minister Heiko Maas wants courts to be able to punish sexual violence in cases where a woman felt unable to resist physically.
So what they want to do is to enshrine the principle no means no in the law. So there shouldn't be a requirement for physical evidence of resisting on terms of the victim.
And this is actually pretty scary. I mean, the whole system is built around the fact that you're innocent until proven guilty. But what they are doing here is reversing this.
Yes, we talked about this in an earlier episode. I can see one way this law could work, but it would probably not be effective at all. If you really require evidence that the victim said no to the sexual act, and then you could prosecute it as a rape, even in absence of physical evidence of resistance. But in what situation do you ever prove that somebody actually refused the physical act, except when there was cell phone evidence or other audio evidence involved?
Right, and also the real tragedy is that I feel like they won't persecute the group that is going to be most responsible and is already most responsible in Germany for rapes. And this is, of course, extremist Muslims that have caused much harm already. And because of the whole social justice policy that the whole community of Muslims is immune to criticism, this is why I think that they won't go after them, but instead they will go after people that just may not be at all guilty of the charges, but since you don't have to prove anymore, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's the problem. So you could sign it into law with a very strict clause requiring audio evidence for the refusal, but then it wouldn't do anything. And if you sign it into law with very lax requirements for evidence, then you open Pandora's box for everybody else. But you talked about Muslim extremism, and Bangladesh has been seeing some of that in the past weeks. And as Majid Nawaz wrote in the Daily Beast on April 26th,
there really is no other way to put this. Free thinkers in Bangladesh are being serially hacked to death in their homes. An infamous hit list appeared in 2013 naming 84 atheist bloggers. By the end of 2015, there had been 7 such murders across the country, and, tragically, this past week alone claimed 3 more victims.
again, what I think the most shameful situation about this whole thing is that the left and our governments don't talk about this problem, don't mention the problems that Muslim extremism causes, but instead they are focusing on their own countries, further promoting their victimized mentality of the Muslim community. So they are not focused on real issues at all.
See, I wrote some stuff down about this, and that's exactly what I wrote down too. It's a dangerous ideology that's influential all over the world now, and especially in those still, I won't call them Muslim countries, but countries where Islam is very, very popular and where they have a firm hold on the public. And with these dangerous ideologies, bloggers, atheists, secularists, gay, trans people being hunted down and hacked to death on public streets, we really have to name the problem. And I think that's where our governments fail on a big scale.
Right. It's very scary, but what people would say and do say is that, oh, wait, we have Christian extremists and we have a problem with religion in the West as well. But these people who make these statements, of course, yes, we have a problem with religion as well, but it's not even remotely close to what's happening with Islam right now. And yes, it's, I guess, and I certainly think that, and to some extent hope that some of the problems we see in Islam is due to the fact that it spread in the very poor third world countries, and this is some contributor. And I say I hope that because through economic development it can be to some extent fixed, but we can't just ignore the whole ideology of Islam and proclaim that, oh no, it's totally innocent.
Yeah, that's a good point. However, the problem is also that we are directly importing the ideology from these countries. In Germany, we have a lot of mosques and imams working in these mosques which are funded by outside sources, usually in those Islam popular countries. So they are directly importing an imam from there who has the ideology from there into the country, and then we are importing this crazy, crazy extremism into our countries, and we get our young people who go to the mosque and expose them to these people who can be very persuasive. So let's get into our main discussion. And the first point we will talk about today is the security in our society and how that might or might not lead to weakness. And you were the one who first proposed this topic, so why don't you go ahead and make an introduction of it?
Well, I mean, what I wanted to discuss and just take a look at is the amount of violence or lack of it that the Western societies are exposed to. Mainly, if we take a look at the last 50 or even more years, we haven't had any wars, and that's of course a good thing. Also, we have much more secure societies, and we'll talk through these topics, but what I wanted to get from this topic is a perspective that maybe exposing people to violence and making not very safe societies is not actually a really bad thing, because people who go to wars and even at home feel that they have to be physically and mentally prepared to deal with real violence and real problems, may be stronger mentally.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting topic, I thought, when you first brought it up. So, to get into this, of course, you said we haven't really been having any wars since about 1950s. Well, we did have some wars, of course. I mean, the Iraq War in the Middle East, but it's nowhere comparable as to the number of deaths in wars before that, namely in World War II and World War I, of course.
Yeah, right. And also what I wanted to point out is that, of course, we have had wars, many wars, but they were not they didn't take place in Western societies. They didn't take place in US. They didn't take place in Europe. So that's not, or Western Europe, because in Eastern Europe, that's already a bit different by now. But I think this has a huge impact on people and how they are brought up.
Yes, I think you're correct there. So with the removal from violence from the public square, I think we are losing something. And that is mainly, in my opinion at least, this view that all the peace and freedom we have comes from protecting our societies. We are losing this today, and we can see this with immigrant politics, with the vilifying the national identity of countries, with the complete and utter denial of any kind of war, even be it defensive. People don't realize anymore that the freedom and peace we have has to be protected, and has to sometimes be protected with violence.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that because of this, people also don't know what real values and real problems are. So they develop this culture we have seen lately, which is all about not your feelings not getting hurt, instead of focusing on real problems, because this generation doesn't know what a war is and how tragic it is. Also, people, because they are not accustomed to violence, there is still a chance that you can be in a situation where you have to respond to violence, because we are humans. You can't eradicate violence from society, and some people are going to exploit it. And if the vast majority of people are not accustomed to it, they will just freeze and not know what to do, even if they could potentially prevent it.
So in a sense, this is analogous to an evolutionary scenario where you are always vulnerable to a member exploiting the group. Because the moment we drop all violence and somebody picks up violence as a tool to get what he wants, we are essentially defenseless, right?
Right. It's this analogous to what you refer to, I think, is something that was promoted by many game theorists and evolutionists who are talking about the gene for exploiting kindness, exploiting altruism. If everyone is totally altruistic and pacifistic, then you can easily exploit it. But on the other hand, do we really want societies that are going to war, and I mean, where people are dying in vain for political and economic tribal ideas? Do we really want a generation? Do we really want a society where this is happening?
Well, obviously not. You said they are our generation, because it's our generation. Both of us are in this generation, start inventing or focusing on small issues as our main problems because we don't have these things. And in a way, that's a good thing because we don't have to worry about all the violence that sometimes can or often makes life unbearable. If you're in these situations, it's terrible. It's a terrible human loss on both sides usually. The problem is, though, and you touched on that, is that it's not going away. I don't think we want to actively put people into war-like situations. There's other stuff we can talk about that might give similar feelings later and that are completely benign, but what we don't want to do is create this bubble and push every inch of violence outside of that bubble. We still have murders in our countries. We still have to go to war with other countries. There's Bangladeshis being hacked to death in Bangladesh. We have to help Syrians to end their civil war. But all that is, or at least the violence in that is often pushed outside of that bubble. We can't show anything about violence on the media, at least not real violence, and it's often ignored.
Okay, I mostly agree, but then the question becomes how do we get this issue solved by exposing the bubble and getting people accustomed to the idea of violence without actually the potential for losing innocent lives and creating wars, creating a society of depression, which can be caused by massive amounts of war deaths. So how can we get this experience without actually exposing people to real war? And somehow with that, we have to also focus our societies on helping others, right? Because what we have seen in Bangladesh, for example, if people are focused on the issues that, okay, we don't want to get the same problems home, and maybe we should even help those societies to get through that, we will still have the need for military, but we don't actually want to go and conquer the whole world, right?
Well, I think one of the ways to do this is simply media. We have to give, especially military and military intervention, which has had a terrible reputation with the Iraq War and all that's surrounded that. It's had a terrible, terrible reputation. We have to reverse that in the media. We have to stop giving trigger warnings for everything. We have to stop censoring violence in the media. If there's a terrorist attack, we have to be able to show the pictures from there. We have to be able to show people this is happening in our home cities, and we have to be able to talk openly about the violence in the Syrian war and that people need help there, and that it's not a shameful thing to go out there and help people.
Right, so basically you're saying, and I would somewhat agree to that, is that we have to create or recreate the good picture of our militaries, our armies that it had, because some decades ago it was still considered to be proud to be in military. It's something for a great cause. But now everyone is not only skeptical of the military, as you pointed out, but also attacking them, which is due to the regressive ideology that we have seen on in the Western societies on the left politics.
And I tell you what, I felt for the same thing, because while I was in the education system, mainly in secondary school, I thought people who go to the military, who could become soldiers, are just idiots who want to bring people harm, or who want to be seen as cool. But now I realize, no, we should honor these people. They are giving their lives for our protection and for the protection for other people. But it's not only the military. This de-violent society also takes out small-scale violence completely out of context. If you think about the police shootings, for example, the police sometimes has to shoot people. And in America, even more so, because there are so many people, so you get way more crimes, of course, and then you get a bunch of police shootings if you look across the whole country. But people take them out of context completely and vilify the police who every day of their work put their lives on the line. I mean, any traffic stop could end fatally for a police officer. And sometimes when there are people who mean harm to other people, they have to use their weapons to stop these bad people. And of course, sometimes that goes wrong. And we should try to prevent these deaths, and we should look at them objectively and think about how can we train these officers better, how can we improve the system to prevent unneeded deaths. But we shouldn't go out and vilify the police officers.
Yeah, I agree, but don't you think that some sinister outlook on the military police is somewhat justified? For example, yeah, it's great that people in military are fighting for great causes, but they are not always great causes. American politics have been pretty unjustifiable in some instances. It's been wars for just controlling oil as well. It's not always some great benevolent cause. And police, for example, is badly trained. Of course, the answer isn't to say that every police officer is a bad person, and anybody who gets into that field is just a maniac who wants to abuse his power. But if we stop questioning military, if we stop questioning police, then nobody will think about that these guys lack training, and they do lack training. We have seen the results.
Yes, you brought up a good point there. Of course, we should not stop questioning them. What I'm saying is that we should use realism. We should start realizing and start emphasizing that there is sometimes need for violence, and there are clear situations, sometimes more unclear situation in which that is needed. And we want the best possible outcome in these situations. And that is when we have to think about how can we improve the police officers' training? How can we improve our government so it makes better decisions when it comes to going to war? But what we shouldn't think is, our government or the police are evil. Sometimes for the government that's somewhat justified. There may be events for the police where it's justified, but we should look at it from a positive point in thinking, how can we improve this? How can we resolve these violent situations better? How can we protect everybody who's in these situations? Instead of saying, oh no, you are bad, you did something wrong, and now we are completely against everything you do.
Okay, so we need better training. We both agree on that, and we both agree that we need these institutions because the violence is such a natural part of humans that it's not going away. But can we imagine that if our societies become way less violent, then people can adapt to them epigenetically as well. And maybe we can create such societies that it will be never worth to be violent. And maybe we can somehow eradicate violence. I mean, it's of course a really utopian outlook, but in principle it could happen, couldn't it?
Well, see, I've got an issue with this because, as you said, it's very utopian. Could it potentially be real? Is there a theoretical possibility for this kind of society? Yes, probably. Can I imagine it? How it would work? Not at all. I wouldn't even know how to get there.
Well, that's it, of course, yeah. Not knowing how we get there is not equivalent to we can't get there. But I brought it up because I think the people who are very skeptical of the institutions that essentially control the security of our societies through using violence, because you have to use, the police officers do use violence, otherwise how can they have the power over you? I think these people just imagine that we should get into this society where violence is not an option at all.
It's a good idea. Don't get me wrong. They have good intentions. But to make any kind of meaningful progress without dooming our societies, you have to show me a way to go forward. You can't just say, no, we have to stop going to war. If you do that, then you have to explain to me how we save people who are being murdered, how you can stop a dictator who is committing a genocide. How do we stop these people without the violence? And if you can paint me a picture of how we can do that, then we can talk about it.
Yeah, problem is that we can't get there right now. We are not there. So, and I think this is the issue, that some people actually think that, oh, our societies could be so great, and this is why we can accept anybody into our societies, and there won't be any problems. And as soon as they see how awesome we are, then they will just integrate, and there won't be any problem. But since this is not how it works, this is why we need institutions to and people to get used to violence. And I think one ways of that is actually martial arts. What do you think about that?
Well, I have to say I've never personally done some, but I've been very interested in them lately, mainly because of the podcast by Jocko Willing, a Navy SEAL or former Navy SEAL, who talks about it a lot. And I think on a personal level, especially for learning how to deal with conflicts and to get used to interpersonal violence and to get a feeling how you even can maybe avoid those or how you can gauge a situation, it sounds like a great idea.
Right, and he talks about, and I've heard a lot of other people talking about jiu-jitsu, for example, and how it teaches humility. And there are just so many great qualities that it can provide, just learning and doing that particular martial arts. So first of all, you can just handle yourself. You can handle situations where there could be potential, or it can be resolved only with some kind of violence. And also it's great for our physique, and just people who get exposed to violence, they through martial arts, for example, there may be a chance that they become better humans, or is it a stretch there?
I don't think it's necessarily a stretch. It sounds like a stretch, certainly. But if you start framing it from a different angle, if you start talking about people who know how to handle themselves and deal with violence and de-escalate these situations by focused application of force, then it suddenly doesn't sound like a stretch anymore. If you or I or some other person knows they can defend themselves in a certain situation, let's take a drunk guy in a tram who is molesting an old lady. And you know, if push comes to shove, you can deal with him, you can get him unconscious so that he can't hurt people anymore, and then police can arrest him. You have the confidence to step in and say, hey dude, stop doing that. And you have the confidence to de-escalate the situation before you even have to apply violence. And I think that's where the stretch just evaporates. It's not a stretch.
Right, but isn't there argument for or against martial arts though? If we say that, okay, but what if everybody is learning martial arts, everybody is an expert, then suddenly you won't be necessarily be able to handle this situation because the person you're trying to handle is also great at this, and what we just get is more sophisticated bullies and more sophisticated good people. So it's just everybody's going to punch other people way stronger, right?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation, and indeed. I honestly don't know what to say to this. Yes, it's probably right. The question then becomes, are people still bullies when they are subjected to martial arts training, where you also learn humility and respect? I don't know. I personally didn't go through martial arts training yet. I certainly plan on trying jiu-jitsu. But the question then becomes, is there a training aspect that prevents people from becoming bullies?
Yeah, and as we've discussed, if martial arts does indeed, and I have no idea because I didn't experience it, but many people who are really into that stuff are saying that it teaches humility, it teaches self-esteem. So if these qualities are gained by martial arts, then we would have way fewer bullies. Also, I would argue that if everybody is just more sophisticated physically, then this problem also, well, not evaporates, but it's going to be way better, because there are way more good people who are ready to defend others than there are bullies, even in our modern society, but I guess it's going to be even better and better. The problem is that people now are not exposed to violence early on, so they freeze in such situations. But if everybody can handle themselves, then just the fact that good people outnumber the bullies, that's going to be a pillar for a safer society as well.
That's a good point. So we should, as a society, get stronger and not be weak in the sense that we are completely unaccustomed to violence. We shouldn't want to experience violence directly necessarily, but we have to acknowledge that it's there. And might I just suggest another point which might be helpful in this, and that's traveling. I think people should travel and see other cultures or inform themselves about cultures. This behavior, as you said earlier, it's because they think, oh, our society is so great, so we can just get other people from other cultures in here and they would just assimilate, and everything will be fine. But no, there are cultures in the world which are violent, and people coming from these cultures are vastly different than people from here. And if they've been living there for years, then you can't expect them to just change. So getting in touch with other cultures is also a big point, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we have taken a look at the more physical aspects of our security in our societies, but there is also something else going on in our societies, and that's the high social welfare systems that are more or less across the Western European countries, and also US is becoming a social welfare system as well. So what do you think? Is it a good idea or is it not?
See, my general problem with the welfare state, I see it failing in Germany. Germany has a big welfare state, but for example, public pensions. The time you get your pension has been shoved back and back and back over the years because our societal structure can't handle a system and can't pay enough to pay for all the old people. So on a personal experience, the social welfare state seems to fail. So the problem though is there's very little data on whether it's beneficial to the overall economy to provide a lot of social welfare.
Right. We have gathered some statistics about that, or at least, well, not on the fact that it's beneficial or not, but at least to get a perspective on how much we spend on it. Can you just list a couple of statistics about that?
So, over Central European countries, the statistics is on, we spend on average about 22% of the GDP of a country on social welfare. And about 12.3% of that, on average, are cash benefits, and 8.6% are social and health services. And then we have a bunch of other stuff that's happening. So we spend 22% of the of the GDP in social welfare. And my question is, can that amount of money be used on the economy in some other meaningful way and would achieve similar effects as we want from the social welfare state?
Well, we are talking about over a fifth of the annual GDP, so you can achieve a lot of that. My first point would be funding science, for example. That's in long term, I think, way more beneficial than just people getting their secure lifestyles through government. Okay, so the first question is it about, I think it's phrased this way nowadays in Western societies, but is it about human dignity that people have worked through their middle age, their life, and they just want to, for example, with pension, get a nice last 30 years, for example, of their life and travel around the world. Also, people who can't get the health care that they really need. So is it about human dignity, or is it just a good idea with a very bad system?
I think if you work hard throughout your life, it would be more effective to put your money, or a portion of your money, into your own retirement fund. so you can judge yourself, how much money do I want to have? How much money can I put away? And what kind of lifestyle do I want to have later on? The idea that, especially it's forced on people, that you have to have the public pension fund and you have to pay in there and you have to get something out of there, I think that simply doesn't work anymore. People have to be responsible for their own actions.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that the problem is that the whole premise is that other people pay for my stuff, right? And it's forced on them instead of just saving your money. But what is the case? What's up with the cases where people can't earn enough to save for themselves and they can't afford to go to a hospital and they might die of undiagnosed illness because of lack of welfare system, lack of governmental help?
That's of course a difficult point. I don't think we should let anybody die because they don't have enough money and they are looking for help. But there should be incentives to deal with that yourself. You shouldn't just get everything for free, or at least not everything from taxes necessarily. Because the problem with the tax system is you're taking some money now and put it into a system. And you're assuming, though, that the societal structure of that system, the money in and the money out, stays somewhat similar now and in the future. If it changes from now to the future, then the whole concept doesn't work anymore because suddenly you have a lot of old people and not that many young people, but the not many young people have to pay for all the old people because the money the old people put into the system was spent on the old people back then. If you, however, assign money for yourself to some pension account, then that's your money you paid for yourself. There is designated money that you put in back then and that is available now. And similar with healthcare systems, if you have money now, you work, then I think there's a point to be made to force you into putting it into some account. But you shouldn't force people to go into, for example, an insurance company necessarily. There should be an option to say, no, I'm opting out of this. I don't want this. Here's a paper I signed. I have my private healthcare money in some account, privately or from some other private company. Or to say, I don't want to put money away, but I'm waiving my healthcare rights. Or to go into some maybe publicly funded stuff, but you should be able to have a choice.
Well, I mean, choice is nice, but what if you don't have that money what if you don't earn enough that you can put aside some money and then use it later when you actually need it? Also, what you alluded to earlier is that it's mostly young people now spending money through taxes on older people. But, for example, the education is not about older people. Education, for example, is something that we invest in people early on and hope, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work at all, or it's just a bad system. But the premise is that later, because they had an opportunity to go to learn in elementary school, in secondary school, maybe in even university, they are going to get jobs and paid back through taxes.
It's a good point. The problem, though, is you have to balance the two cash flows. If you think about it on an economic level, and I'm certainly not an economist, but if I, as a layperson, think about it, then the investment of the money into education and the money I need to pay for older people, for example, or for sick people, they have to be balanced out in a way that the benefit I get from the education has to be more than I put in, and also more enough to then also pay for the pension people. So it's a very delicately balanced system. I think in the form of colleges, for example, I don't think it's wrong to say to students, okay, you're getting this, but you yourself, you should contribute something for the stuff we provide you with. I'm not saying you have to get $200,000 like in the US in debt when you study, but you could have a system where you say, okay, I'm studying here, and then when I get my degree for 15 years, I pay 5% of my salary back to the university. I think those direct systems are way less fragile than all this. We invest here and hope that that works for that, and then we need money for that, and we hope that creates some incentive to do that. No, I think we have to get direct relations of cash flow, and we also have to say to people, okay, this stuff costs money, and you have to work hard to do something, and that way we get people who know working hard pays off. And then we get a better functioning economy and society overall.
Right. I actually really like the idea you just mentioned, that you have to pay, for example, some percentage of your salary after you finish university. And that's something we actually have here in Hungary, at least with my university. So that's not an imaginary thing. And what you didn't mention specifically, but that was a really important point included implicitly, is that we have to remind people that it's not for free, that what you're getting out of university through the government it's not for free. Some people are paying for that, and maybe that's actually would fix problems when most university majors are kind of useless. I mean, social sciences, gender studies, and stuff like this. Maybe people wouldn't be so keen to go there and get useless diplomas that they can't get a job with, because they will know that there are consequences for choosing and paying for that degree.
And that also goes back kind of to the healthcare point. I kind of opted out there on the healthcare because I don't personally have the super good policy on healthcare to make a system work. But a structure like this, where you instill in young people that you have to work hard to get something, to get somewhere, to pay for your doctor's bill because he has to feed his children, to pay back your university because they provided you with all this education. Then you have a society which thinks economically, who think as entrepreneurs and who want to make stuff happen and to maybe take a risk or two, but weigh these risks against the benefits and not live in this fairy world where they can just make anything. And I think one other stuff, despite college majors, is Kickstarter. Kickstarter is one of the big symptoms of this society where everybody is living on some cloud in the sky and get $300,000 for a product which, simply because of the physics involved, cannot work. And one good channel on YouTube to find out about this stuff is Thunderfoot's channel, and we'll link to that in our show notes, because people just fund interesting and cool ideas with thousands and thousands of dollars, even though they are complete dog shit. And that's not good for society.
Right, that's actually an opening door, and it's it's already wide open for people to scam others, and this is what these crowdfunders are about. So the perception of rewards for work has changed dramatically in this generation compared to previous generations, because we are not thinking about creating economically viable systems and building careers to provide for us and our children. The perception of reward for the work now is that, okay, I am doing this stuff, I'm amazing just because I'm a special person and everybody's special and everybody's owe me some money just because I'm doing stuff, right?
Yes, I couldn't have summed it up better. The whole system of social welfare has good intentions. I don't want people to die on the streets. But maybe if you don't work, or if you are a gender studies, dance, therapy major, maybe you should live in a 5 square foot apartment, get just no cash benefits, but instead get clothes from the state. Not nice clothes, just average clothes. Not nice food, average food. It shouldn't be nice to not work or to not do stuff. You shouldn't be rewarded for just doing anything. And you summed that up perfectly, I think.
Yeah, right. I mean, you shouldn't be rewarded for not producing anything. But on the other hand, there is the argument that some people may be doing important work, at least important in the eyes of society, like art or science, that doesn't pay well. Maybe that's an argument for the fact that people can be doing important work and they want to fulfill themselves without actually producing a lot. And what earns you money is producing stuff. So is it always a good idea to be this production centric?
Well, I don't quite buy that argument. I think it's set on a wrong premise. You're saying it's focused on production. We only get money when we produce stuff, which is somewhat true, but even arts people, even a painter, or let's say a sculptist, or a singer in the an opera house, even they produce something, and that's entertainment. And if we as people value entertainment, then we pay for it. So they have an economic incentive to do it. But if only 2 people enjoy what they are doing, and all the rest of the people don't find it interesting, then they have no product to sell. They don't have any entertainment, and then there is no societal benefit to it.
Well, okay, that's fair enough. But as you know, you very well know that there is a problem with funding in sciences, for example, in not in social sciences, but in proper natural sciences. But this is just due to the market economics, right? So we shouldn't alternate anything there. We shouldn't tweak anything. Yet you would argue, I presume, that science is very important. So there is a room for government stepping in, or how can it work out?
Your presumption is right. I would think science is important, and even my beloved opera houses, they would all go bankrupt tomorrow if government funding was pulled out. I don't think, however, that this is due to there being no interest in it. I think it's a marketing and business issue. These structures are not trained to provide what people want, or at least market themselves in a way. I think there's huge potential for a number of universities to have more closer ties to companies to invest in what we call in Germany dual programs, which are programs where you half of the time work and half of the time get a university education. I think there's a huge potential there. I think there is more promotion to be made, for example, for an opera house, but also for a university to get in private sponsors, to figure out a system where people who studied at the universities pay money back. I don't think it's a government issue. I think the fact that the government has been sponsoring these institutions that much made them lazy. They don't have a business person on top who understands how to run a business, who understands how to get in funding, how to manage money. Instead, they have some old people who believe in some values and doesn't get done much.
Yeah, okay, I agree, but just the fact that we are talking about that people are relied on governments to get funding or just to survive. That brings up a whole other issues, like I would say psychological issue of modern Western societies, and that's of self-efficacy.
Well, yes, all this culture is leading to people not being able to do stuff themselves. They expect other people to do it. If you want, for example, to get an internship, you ask somebody, oh, can you get me an internship? I can't get, you write 5 applications and then you go, oh, I don't know how I can get an internship. Can't you help me? Or I don't know how to get a job. Can't you help me out? I don't know how to do this. Can't you help me out?
Yeah. And, also the fact that people should, work out things on their own. It's not just something that would minimize the others' anger at the fact that they have to help just random strangers through taxes, but also being on your own and creating career that will pay well is and learning stuff on your own that makes people emotionally stronger, I would argue. It promotes developing yourself, learning, figuring out stuff. That I think it's something we have kind of lost in this generation. Don't you agree?
Oh, I agree completely. And that might be one of the points. Our generation is often so unhappy because we don't achieve things. Humans are built to achieve stuff. We are built to fight for our lives, to go up against a problem, to fight hardship and to pull through. And that's what makes us happy. Take, for example, our podcast. We had no idea how to produce a podcast. Zero idea at all. And you could argue we still don't have much of an idea. But we didn't go to some podcasting coach and said, oh, please, can you teach us? No, we went out in the internet and we read a bunch of stuff, and we read a lot, and we spent a lot of time reading reviews about mics and mixers and software. And we took the risk and said, we want to make this happen.
And we shouldn't have. We should have gone to the government and tell them that why are there no courses in universities that teach podcasting, please? And then create a petition that would launch podcast courses in universities. I think that would have been the way to go.
That would certainly have been much easier, but we didn't do that. We went out and took the risk. We bought a bunch of equipment. We still don't know if this will ever lead somewhere. We took a bunch of our time. But you know what? Every time we hit that record button, every time we prep for an episode, it's fun. It's so much fun because we make something and we invest a lot of time in it.
Right, but I would actually mention something that despite that I think it's really important for people to still realize that this shouldn't discourage them from interconnectivity, from teamwork, because if you look at all the companies, if you look at all the successful careers and people, it's mostly achieved via teamwork, via people getting together and creating some stuff. So I want to highlight that the fact that you have to be emotionally stronger and figuring out stuff on your own, it shouldn't discourage you from doing this with other people as equals and not just receiving help from them. But I think there is an underlying issue here, is that it's really difficult to separate the two ways. The one that's, oh, I'm just living off people who are helping me, and, oh, people are helping me and I'm helping them, and together we are creating something. It's not a straight line that separates the two. There is nothing of that.
It's certainly difficult to draw the line. I agree with that. And if we want to achieve that, we have to instill it in our culture and our society. We have to go out and make our whole society better. We have to bring back the realization of violence again. We have to get stronger so we can protect our societies. We have to learn how to take a risk and achieve something. All that filters together to make our society stronger and make our people stronger. We have to change the perception, and we have to change the system to do that. The system we have now is breeding weak people, and that's not a good thing, and we have to change it. So every one of you, get out there and get after it. And also, head over to iTunes, head over to your podcasting app, and subscribe to Jocko Podcast. It's really worth your time. And we've been riffing on this stuff a bit today. It's worth your time. It's one of the best podcasts we've ever listened to. And with that, see you in our next episode. Enjoyed the episode and want to make your voice heard? Head over to reddit.com/r/needlesslycomplicated or chat with us on Twitter @ReasonFelix for Felix and @Yashoka for Yasha. If you want to support the show, head over to iTunes and rate plus write us a review. It's the best way to support the podcast right now and to help grow the community. You can also share the podcast with your friends via social media or even better, in person.